Okay, before we get into it, I want to say something quickly and from the heart. This episode is a big deal to me. Like, genuinely, not in a dramatic way, just in a quiet, I've been working on this for over 2 years now. And I really hope it makes a difference for some of you out there navigating this system with your kids. So here's the ask. You can make a difference too, to this podcast. If damn parenting has ever helped you figure something out, it saved you from a panic Google at midnight, or just made you feel a little less alone in this very particular experience of raising our kids here in the Netherlands, the single best thing you can do is to subscribe. And if you've already done that, or if you're feeling extra generous, leave a review or share it. Forward it to a parent in the WhatsApp group, the Facebook group, wherever. Just anyone who might be asking questions. Just tell someone. It costs nothing and it means everything. And it helps more families find this. Okay, that's it. Now, let's get to the good stuff. Welcome back to another episode of Damn Parenting. I am your host, Eva. Now, I'm going to start today's episode a little differently. There's this phrase, mama bear. Everyone's probably heard it. Maybe you even use it. I kind of half understood it. Like, yeah, of course, everyone protects their kids. Of course you do. But then I actually lived it. And I'm not going to get into the details. It's not that kind of an episode, but there was a period where my instincts were telling me that something was not right with my daughter. And I would sit up night after night. And this is from back when she was 1. So we're talking over 4 years ago. It happened multiple times over multiple months over these multiple years. And basically, I was putting my own sleep and my own needs somewhere at the very bottom of any list, because there and then, the only thing that mattered to me was her. And I had to learn to advocate in a way that was completely new to me, and in a system I did not understand, and in the language that was not my own. And somewhere in the middle of all of that, this is what Mama Bear actually really meant. You're going to fight for your child. You're going to find those words even when you do not have those words, and you're going to push even when you feel like you're being too much. So since then, I've actually met a lot of parents in our community whose children are navigating everything from food allergies and asthma to things that are more internal, more psychological, harder to name. And every single one of them has had to figure out a healthcare system that is not the one that they grew up in. A system with different rules, different language, different philosophy, and sometimes a different way of listening. Which is why from the very beginning of Damn Parenting, I've been trying to get the right people on this podcast, not just general advice. Actual practitioners, the people inside the system who can help us understand it. So when we walk in to an appointment, to a consultation, or any conversation, we're not starting from zero. We're starting from somewhere. So for over 2 years now, I've tried. I've sent emails and DMs. I physically showed up events, and I was told more than once that expats are not the priority right now. And every single time I tried to carefully explain, it's not just expats. It's us immigrants. It is anyone who did not grow up here, who does not have the Dutch parenticle, and who does not have the cultural shorthand that tells you which door to knock on and what to say when it opens. And then last November, well, something shifted, thanks to the wonderful April from healthyhere.nl, a space that exists specifically to support our community in the Netherlands, to help us find and understand the systems around us. I was introduced to someone from the tthe, and they put me in touch with a doctor from the children's unit. And I've been sitting on this episode now, well, for the last month. Between sickness and whatever, well, basically, I'm afraid I just wouldn't do it justice. And the nerves got the better of me. And, well, the nerves are nerving is all I can say. I'm still nervous, if I'm honest, even saying this out loud. But here we are. Today on Damn Parenting, Dr. Marenne van Hangel Budde is a youth health care doctor who's going to join us to shine some light on the system that so many of us are trying to figure out. Her team works under the different names depending on where you live in the Netherlands. The tthe in Amsterdam, the CJZ, the JGZ. We're going to get into all of that. I hope there's something in this episode that you can take away and hold on to, because something that makes you feel a little bit more confident the next time you go sitting in the waiting room, or you're picking up the phone, or you're just trying to figure out which door to knock on. That's all I've ever wanted this podcast to do. Let's welcome Marenne van Hangel Budde. Thank you so much for joining us on Damn Parenting.
Good morning. I'm happy to join.
It took a while to finally get someone from the GGD to join us, so I'm sincerely thankful for you willing to come on and shed light on the system. So we hear a lot from international parents that sometimes they can arrive into the system and sometimes they are pregnant in the system. And at the end of the day, the system is very foreign, not just language, but the whole structure. Can you tell us, what do you think catches people off guard the most?
Yes. So the region I work with a lot of people from different regions, a lot of expats. And I think what's quite complex to comprehend is that in many countries, healthcare is organized in a different way. You have different systems to enter the healthcare system. You have different ways of contacting the healthcare when you have an emergency or when you need your child to be seen or anything. So they're used to the way healthcare systems works in their country, and then they have to adapt to our system. It's probably part of the difficulties is the language, and then we can, I think, zoom in on different healthcare professionals that might be a bit specific for the Netherlands. For example, like a GP and a midwife. So we have a lot of first line care here that's maybe uncommon for people in the country where they came from.
And I think there's always a kind of question is it just us, or do Dutch people also find the system a little confusing? Or is it only just from us coming from a different system?
I think it could be both ways. So if you're grown up here, you're educated with the system, I think it's quite clear. But yeah, if you're not used or don't use healthcare a lot, it might be difficult also for Dutch people.
Good to know it's not just us. And the cultural layer is real, I guess. Because it's not just that the system works differently. There is a different philosophy behind it, depending on where you're from as well. The relationship between patient and doctor and the decisions that also get made. Can you speak a little bit about that? You know, about things like the paracetamol and the antibiotics and the referrals and everything else?
Yes. So I think talking about that, maybe indeed it's seen as a bit of a Dutch routine. And I think we get to the point there that we explain a little bit about the Huisarts. So it's called the GP. And we have a lot of Huisarts in the Netherlands. And the Huisarts is a very important person. The Huisarts is actually the key person to go to regarding any physical and or mental health issues. They offer medical generalistic care, they can prescribe medication, and they also refer to specialists if needed. But they are very well educated. They've done a very severe educational program, and they help out with a lot of things, as I say, regarding physical and or mental health issues. To get back to your question regarding paracetamol and antibiotics, I think the Netherlands are maybe seen as a bit of a defensive country regarding prescription of medication. I think this is partly because we are educated and raised in this way, and this is the system, how we've organized it and how it works. Regarding, for example, the antibiotics, it's also quite important for us to prevent the resistance for antibiotics. Whereas in different countries, I am aware that they often prescribe antibiotics for maybe airway infections or cough and colds. Whereas here in the Netherlands, we generally do not do that. And that's also an important reason, because mainly these airway infections are caused by viruses, and antibiotics generally do not help and work against viruses. They're mainly working for a bacterial infection. Yeah, and of course there is also, medical policy, how we indeed organize the country, how we organize the healthcare, that has influence on these decisions. I think it's good to emphasize that, at least for us as Dutch people, the fact that a GP will not prescribe any specific medication is not the same as not taking good care of the client or the patient. It's maybe, as you say, our philosophy, and sometimes for foreigners it's seen as not taking good care of us or not doing anything, just prescribing paracetamol. But I think we see it in a different way.
And that frustration can also be real for the families who basically arrive here having had completely different experiences. Some come from systems where you just walk into a specialist. Some systems where the GP would have done a lot more antibiotic prescription giving or listening to what you need and basically adhering and saying, okay, let's give you what you're thinking might work for you. There's no one other type of system, I guess. So this Dutch system is genuinely unique, and therefore every other system is also unique in their own ways. How do you handle that in the practice with your international patients?
So I think from my point of view, so we work in the youth healthcare system, so we're a preventive healthcare organization. And I think explaining and giving some time as we meet new people, we always plan a home visit. We try to explain the system. We try to explain how things work, how things run, who you can contact for certain different needs or questions. So I think it's always good as a community to be open to people from other countries and to make time to explain how things work, and also to have respect for the fact that they are used to such a different system. So it's not easy for them to adapt and to understand. And if we pay attention to that, I think that's a good attitude to try to help them and be available to answer the questions.
Okay, well, with that, let's try and answer some questions, I guess. Let's lay out the map, as it would, because I think the first thing international parents need is just names and what they do. So can we start with you, for example, in simple terms, I guess, who is the Huisarts and what do they actually do?
Yes, so in the Netherlands, after your medical degree of about 6 years at university, you're registered as a basic doctor. From that point of view, you can go into a specialization. So you can specialize into GP, Huisarts, which is another 3 years. You can also specialize in any other specialty like surgeon, gynecologist, for example, pediatrician. And you can work in the preventive healthcare sections like youth healthcare. And regarding the GP, so they've done a thorough education with a lot of practical experience. They're trained to handle emergencies, they're trained to prescribe medication, they're trained to deal with a lot of general healthcare issues. It could be anything. It's wounds, it's problems from your internal organs. You can have problems with your mental health. They can always see you. GP is generally free of charge. And they can decide whether they can treat you, they can guide you, or they can refer you to a specialist or to another type of professional. So I think they're a good sort of first person to contact to discuss your questions and complaints.
And I think there's going to be some families out there or some listeners out there that, well, when we find out we're pregnant, we automatically ring the Huisarts. But, well, all we get is, congratulations, now go call your verloskundige. And sometimes we don't really know what that means. Can you explain to us a little bit about why we're seen by the verloskundige? We have a whole episode on the verloskundige back in season 1, so people can go and listen to that, which goes into the whole training. But can you just explain just a little bit why we're seen by them and not by you?
So in the Netherlands, the midwives play a central and independent role in maternity care, unlike in many other countries where obstetricians or gynecologists are the primary providers. The Dutch midwives are responsible for the first line primary care for pregnant women with low-risk pregnancies. So I think that's good to emphasize. So the midwives, they're trained, they see you throughout the whole pregnancy, they make ultrasounds, they monitor your blood pressure, they do the lab applications and results, and they guide you. As soon as you do have, for whatever reason, a bit of a complicated or higher risk pregnancy, then they have also these guidelines that they need to refer you to the specialist, which will be the obstetrician gynecologist in the hospital. And then from that moment onwards, you'll be guided by them. And if that's the case, you will also give labor in the hospital. I think that's maybe also good to emphasize. It's quite different from other countries, maybe in the world, that the midwives do guide the labor either at home, if patients want that, or they can guide the labor in the hospital, but under their care, if it's a low-risk pregnancy. And as I said, if you're into gynecology and you're guided by the obstetrician, then you'll always give labor under their care in the hospital.
Okay, so for new and expectant parents listening, registering with a verloskundige is your first step in pregnancy. Your Huisarts is still important, but they do hand that care over. So that's good to know. Now, let's get into where you work, the JGZ. In English, that's JGZ. And I want to spend some time here because this is where the naming can get confusing. So depending where you live in the Netherlands, this service might be called something different. So can you actually explain to the listeners what it actually is and why listeners might know it by different names?
Yes. So in the Netherlands, youth healthcare, we call it jeugdgezondheidszorg, is organized by the national government. We have a budget for the healthcare system and it's part of the public health system. Every municipality has youth healthcare. In most locations in the Netherlands, it's called the GGD. So youth healthcare is part of the GGD. In some other municipalities, it's called the CJG. So this is the Center Jeugd en Gezin. So the Center for Youth and Families. But we're offering the same care. And I think what's good to emphasize is that to explain a little bit who work for the JGZ. So it's me, it's the youth healthcare doctor. We have a lot of youth healthcare nurses that work with us. We do have also a screen team. So they do the home visits after the babies are born. They screen for congenital diseases. They perform a hearing test in the first week after delivery. And of course, we have a lot of other staff that works with us. We're always divided in different centers per municipality. As you are living in Amsterdam, and maybe a lot of listeners will be in the big city, I think it's good to emphasize that, of course, Amsterdam is a very big city with many different youth healthcare centers. In Amsterdam, they're part of the OKT, so this means the Ouder en Kind team, and that's also how you can find them. I work in Regio Amstelveen, so this is Amsterdam region. We do not work with the OKT structure, but we work in it a little bit in a different way, but I think we can maybe get back to that later on if needed. And what do we do as the youth healthcare? So we're involved with all the families from baby onwards to 19 years old. We also actually do provide care already for pregnant women. So we say actually we work from -9 months from the conception to 19 years. We monitor growth, we monitor well-being, we monitor behavioral development, we monitor motor skills, we perform the national vaccination program, and we give a lot of support to families regarding questions about how to raise the children, but it can also be a bit of broader questions to do with housing, to do with financial things. We can advise them where they can seek help. I think our aim is to have as many happy and healthy children growing up in the Netherlands as possible. We're free of charge, and it's also good to say it's voluntary. So you do not have to use our care. Though in the Netherlands, about 95 to 99% of the families do visit the JGZ. And mainly between the age of 0 to 4, this percentage does visit.
Well, that's great to hear. And this service, whatever it can be called, wherever you are in the Netherlands, it's free, it's proactive, and they also will reach out to you. So you don't necessarily have to find it. Can you explain a little bit to the listeners about the two different approaches, if you're pregnant here or if you arrive here?
If you are registered in the country, so you do have an address and you are a citizen, then when you do have or get a child, automatically the municipality gets a notification that there is a new client, there's a new patient, and automatically the JGZ will be informed of the arrival of the newborn. If you're known in the system, if you might have an older child, we do have already your contact details, so JGZ will reach out to schedule the first home visit to meet the family and to meet the newborn. If you come from abroad and you're new here, as soon as you do give labor and get a child, then also what will happen is that the JGZ will get a notification of a newborn arriving. If we at that time do not know the family yet, what we'll do, we'll send you a letter to the home address, because that's the contact details that we are offered because of the registration in the municipality. We'll send you a letter and we'll introduce ourselves and we say, please provide us your contact details meaning your email address and your phone number, so we can reach out to you and then we can be in touch to schedule appointments.
And just to be completely clear for anyone listening out there who might be tempted to call the tthe or the tthe or the GGD at 11 o'clock tonight with a sick child, that's not what this service is for, right?
Correct. 11 o'clock, it's not generally our working hours, so that's good to emphasize. So we work weekdays, Monday to Friday, 8 till, let's say, 5-ish. And as I try to explain a little bit, so we do monitor growth, well-being, healthcare. We're preventive healthcare. So regarding your question about my child is sick, I do have an emergency or I do have an urgent question without office hours, then indeed you can rely on the GP, or as we maybe come to it, the Huisarts and Post, because they cover the out of office hours for emergency care.
So you just mentioned there, when we have the baby here in the Netherlands, we go and register it and we get the contact details. What about the families who are arriving here with older kids? What happens there?
Yeah, so if we talk about the youth healthcare, actually the same thing happens. So if people arrive here with older kids, it's the same procedure. You register at the municipality, we get a notification, there are new people arriving. We send a letter to contact the family and we await their reply for the contact details to set up appointments. So regarding the youth healthcare system, all the children and babies 0 to 19, they will be automatically pop up in our system. Whereas with the GP, this is a different registration. As families arrive, you do have to seek a GP yourself. So you have to look on the internet, where can I find a general practitioner and can I contact the practice to register as a family or as a person. So this is an active process that the client, the patient, him or herself should follow.
So the gemeente registration is genuinely a trigger for all of this. It's actually not just an admin box that you tick.
For the youth healthcare registration, yes.
That's good to hear. And here's something that I think is actually genuinely useful, and it's not widely known. When the GGD does contact with the family after you register at the gemeente, there's something specific you can do that can make a real difference. Can you give us a little bit more information that parents should be aware about when they get that letter when you arrive in the country?
Yeah, so I can imagine if you come from abroad, there is a lot of new things happening. You live in a new country, there's a new language, so you might get a bit lost in the system. But indeed, us, the GGD, the JGZ, so we're the same organization, we will reach out to all the children and families that register here. And it's very important to indeed open the letter, to see the invite and to get back to us, to give us your contact details so we can set up appointments. And then I think that would also be helpful if we pay a home visit or we speak to you on the phone. We can explain a little bit about the healthcare system, because if we normally pay a home visit, we always explain about the whole system. This is us, this is the JGZ. It's important to seek a Huisarts yourself, to register at the GP. We do have the hospitals. Normally you use hospital care either in emergency settings or if you are referred to the hospital specialist either through us, JGZ, or through the GP. In general, in the Netherlands, specialist and hospital appointments are not available or accessible without a referral. So you cannot pop up at the hospital to ask for an appointment. That's not the way the system works. But we're happy to provide the information and to help people to get around and organize themselves here.
So the tip is, when the GGD gets in touch, make sure you respond, give them your details, tell them your language preference also. That one small action gets your children properly embedded in this system. So make sure you write that down. In fact, go ahead and tattoo that on your arm. Okay, next, the Kinderarts or the pediatrician. When do children in the Netherlands actually get to see one? Because this is very common in other cultures that's where your child is seen. Tell us what the medical system is here, though, in the Netherlands.
Yes, good question. So there's different scenarios. Let's put it that way. So when you are a healthy child, you're under youth healthcare as we provide. And for example, if you have a cough or a cold or you're sick, you see your GP. If you have a more complex issue, you might have a abnormality, you might have a disease that needs to be controlled with the pediatrician, then you are referred to the pediatrician either by us, JGZ doctors, or by the GP. So, for example, you can think of groups like if you suffer from asthma, if you have a congenital disease that needs monitoring, or you need medication prescription for long term because of a disease that you have. If you have intestinal or bowel diseases, you could have something like arthritis or anything. If children suffer or are known with diseases, then they will be referred to the pediatrician. Another big group is premature babies. So depending on your pregnancy and whether it's a low-risk pregnancy with a normal delivery and a healthy baby, or you might have a preterm labor. So generally preterm labors will always be in the hospital, and depending on how premature the baby is at its arrival, the pediatrician will automatically be involved from the first moment after birth. So to make it a little bit more in detail, so a general pregnancy is for about 40 weeks. If it's under 32 weeks, when you give labor, for the first few years, you'll always be monitored by the pediatrician automatically because you're more at risk. If it's a 32 to 40 week delivery, it will depend on the condition. Well, there's a lot of factors that I think it's too much details to zoom into. But generally, you'll be seen by the pediatrician. But if things go well, they will hand over the care again to the jeugdgezondheid, zorg, and the GP.
So last question on this element, I guess, would be the 2 after hours and emergency options, because this is where families really can panic. What is the Huisarts in post, and how is it different from the SEH?
Yes, very good question. We hear this a lot. Same as us, the Huisarts, the general practitioner, they work weekdays from 8 to 5-ish at their practices. From 5 p.m. to 8 a.m., there is the Huisartse Post. It's called the HAP, the HAP. And this is a out-of-office hour Huisartsenpost, where if you have a sick child, if you're sick yourself, it applies for parents, it applies for children, it applies actually for everyone. So you contact the Huisartsenpost. That's actually the first thing to do. And then you're speaking on the phone to someone who asks what the complaints are, and they will judge what is needed. Do you have to come? Do you have to pay a visit? Can you be instructed over the phone? And then they'll make a plan. The Huisartsenpost is not the location to contact when it is an emergency. So if there is a life-threatening situation, you always call 112, and then you'll automatically be referred to the hospital. And the SEH, as you mentioned, so this is the part of the hospital that is occupied by the medical staff, by the professionals. The Huisartsenpost is occupied by GPs, but they work very closely together. They're always in the same center. So when you, for example, enter the Huisartsenpost, it turns out you need to be admitted or you need to be seen by the specialist. They will send you through to the other division, the SEH. But I think the Huisartsenpost, it's a bit of a first step judgment. Is it severe? Is it urgent? I think that's the aim.
Okay. And now I'm just going to do a quick fire round of real scenarios. So this is practical, and hopefully you'll be able to give us a quick answer on each one of these. Scenario 1, it's 7 o'clock. My 2-year-old has a fever of 38.5. There's no other symptoms. Who do I contact?
The Huisartsenpost.
Okay. Scenario 2, my child's 18 months and not walking. Who do I call?
This is a very good question to ask to the GGD. You contact your youth healthcare center and you ask for an appointment, and then we can zoom in on your questions, your worries, and then we can see if we need to do something or what we need to do.
Okay, scenario 3. My child has a rash. It's red spotty. It's not painful, but it is spreading. And it's Saturday afternoon. Who am I to call?
Depends on your worries, but generally, again, the Huisartsenpost, and you ask for care and what is needed. They might say, if you're not worried, if your child is not sick, you can call your own GP on Monday morning, 8 a.m. But if needed, you're always welcome to visit.
Okay, it's now scenario 4. My child has fallen and hit their head. They're crying, but they're seeming fine, but I'm now terrified. What should I do?
Sorry, which day is it?
Well, I don't know, any day. But when a child hits their head, obviously we're a lot more triggered.
Yes, of course. So I think with children, it's always important to seek medical care, especially when you're worried or there is like this, there has been a trauma, there is a injury. So you call the Huisarts or you call the Huisartsenpost, depending whether it's a weekend, an evening or a day. And I think it's always good to contact the doctor to discuss the complaints and see which care is needed.
And finally, a bit of a gray area. I just feel worried kind of parent moment here. My gut's telling me that there's something wrong. I can't really describe what it is. What should a parent do?
I think there's multiple answers possible to this question. So I'm always happy to see these people. I think it's very good to contact your youth healthcare center to request a visit and see the youth doctor and discuss your gut feeling. They can have an assessment, they can see the child, they can see how it grows, we can zoom in on the complaints, and together we can discuss what would help the parent, what actually is the question, what is the worry, what is the concern. Of course, you're also happy to contact the other option, to contact your GP. A GP is also a perfect person to discuss this matter with. So I think both answers are great. In general, it depends a little bit, is my experience, that some GPs, they have a lot of experience with young children. So they're very happy and skilled to work with you. There's also GPs that in their practice or in their municipality do not see so many infants or young children. So they might refer you to the jeugdgezondheidszorg because they say these people work with young children all day long. They're so skilled, they have a lot of experience. Please ask them to see you. So maybe not every GP would respond the same depending on their population and their experience.
Okay, and moving on very quickly, let's just quickly go over the insurance company because this is very complicated and we're not going to get fully into it. But just very quickly, children in the Netherlands, are they automatically covered under the national health insurance?
Yes, so in the Netherlands, health insurance is mandatory for almost everyone. This is the Dutch Health Insurance Act. So everyone who lives and works in the Netherlands needs to have a basic health insurance. Children must be insured, but they are covered for free under their parents' policy. So parents must register themselves with an insurer within 4 months after birth. And then regarding the migrants or the expats, if you live or work in the Netherlands, then usually you must take a Dutch health insurance. Same with a newborn, you must arrange it within 4 months after registration with your municipality or after you start working. Regarding expats, if you work for a Dutch employer, yes, you must have a Dutch health insurance. If you're temporarily posted by a foreign employer, then sometimes you can stay insured in your home country. But many expats initially use international insurance, but they must switch to the Dutch if they become a subject of the Dutch law. So children in general are insured under the parents' policy.
And what's covered?
Everything. For children 0 to 19, youth healthcare is covered, vaccination program is covered, general practitioner care is covered, medication is covered, referral to the specialist and being treated in the hospital by a specialist is covered.
Tapping into what you just said, the referral for the specialist. Can you walk us through how does that actually work?
Yes. So as I mentioned, when you have a condition that requires, for example, pediatric care, then either because of prematurity or because of something that pops up after your delivery, you'll be automatically enrolled in this system, or you are seen by the GP and they think that specific pediatric care is needed. So the GP refers you to the hospital and then you're seen by the pediatrician. The youth doctors can also refer to the pediatricians. I think the most to outline that reasons that I refer, it could be questions regarding with intolerance of dairy or intolerance of food. It can be a growth problem, so either children don't grow that well, a little bit failure to thrive, or they might grow a bit too fast and it might be a risk factor for the future. Other reasons that if I have the suspicion of a medical condition that needs further follow-up, I can refer. Yeah.
And we're going to do another quick fire round. I'm going to read you a statement and you just tell me myth or facts. So we can go straight to a pediatrician anytime we want.
Myth.
Okay, our newborn needs their own Dutch health insurance.
Myth.
The EOR is always the fastest way to get help.
Ooh, difficult one. It's quite fast, so yes, but it's not the route to take.
Okay, and the GP decides everything and they have the final say on all care.
Myth. It's always a negotiation, and it's always the patient has also a lot to say in this.
Okay, this has been quite intense. Didn't expect it to keep going on so long, but there are so many more questions that so many people will have for this. So this is just the first conversation starter we're having here with Dr. Marenne van Hangel Budde. But hopefully we're going to be getting her back to answer a few more of the main topics that our international families have here in the Netherlands. I would love to say thank you so much for joining me. This has been 2 years of trying to get someone to come on to just give us an explanation, because it can feel so confusing here in the Dutch system. So, Dr. Marenne van Hangel Budde, thank you so much for joining us here on Damn Parenting Podcast.
Yes, thank you. It was very nice to be here, and I agree that it's been very briefly. There's so much more to say, so I'm very happy to zoom in on more details, and maybe we can see which topics we need to emphasize more, or which topics we might need to speak about in detail.
Super. Thank you so much.
Thanks for inviting me.
And there you have it. Over 2 years in the making, one conversation, and we've barely scratched the surface, which, well, it tells you everything you need to know about how much there's still to talk about. What I hope you're walking away with today is a foundation, a map, the basic shape of a system that can feel incredibly opaque when you first arrive. Where to go, who does what, why a Dutch GP suggesting paracetamol and sending you home is not the same as not caring about you, even when it feels like it might be, and why the door you knock on first really does matter. And I want to say this really clearly because I believe it with everything going. Always trust your instincts when it comes to your child. You know your child better than any system does. The system is there to support you, and understanding it better means you can use it better. But that instinct, well, that's yours, so keep it. And the good news, I'm genuinely excited about this, is that Dr. Marenne has agreed to come back, and we've got more episodes in the pipeline. Vaccinations, development, behavior, mental health, emergencies. I mean, I don't know what. There's just so much to cover. And I really believe that having a returning guest who actually works inside the system, who actually understands both sides of this conversation, it's actually going to be something you will not just want to come back for. It's something you're going to want to share. And honestly, this is a huge moment for me personally. And I know I'm not a journalist. I know this podcast is held together basically with a lot of love and very little sleep, but I figure every one of these episodes is a conversation starter. At least we know a little bit more than we did before. And sometimes that gets us somewhere. I want to say a giant thank you again to April from healthyhair.nl. If you don't know April's work, go and check her out. She's doing something really important for the community, building the bridge between international families and the systems around us. I hope she's organizing many more events and creating many more connections, because today's episode would not exist without her. And to you, listener, for listening, thank you. Genuinely. Now, if anything in today's episode sparked a question, something you would like Dr. Marenne to answer in the future episodes, I want to hear it. You can drop me a message directly through Spotify, you can DM me on Instagram, you can just send me an email on damnparentingpodcast@gmail.com. All of it gets read, and all of it will shape what comes next. I'm your host, Eva. This is Damn Parenting. Take care of yourselves and your little ones, and I'll see you next week.